Welcome, non-believers, to the network of nonsense. I am Liquid Blake. Today we've got another stream. This one focused more on DC and the box office around DC for maybe the last, probably, what is it now? So probably at least 10 years, maybe even more. Sorry, I've just got to turn this off for a sec. Welcome first. I see some people in the chat. We've got Jade Shadow, Lethal Lightning. Thanks for being here. I wanted to start with a because I was talking about this a lot in my last video, so I wanted to start with a Thor update. Basically, pretty much as we predicted, it crawled to basically. It crawled past the Dark World and is pretty much just over 100 million short of Ragnarok, which is pretty pathetic considering Ragnarok was a bit of a disappointment, considering it was slated just before Infinity War, had that whole build up, and then Thor's character really got a lot of shine in Infinity War, not as much in Endgame, but there was still some hope for the character. But Love and Thunder pretty much failed to deliver anything besides Taika Waititi, maybe a plane ticket back to New Zealand and to continue his indie work. But I'll say we've got some other ones here. We've got so we'll start off with Lethal Lightning's here first. Oh, sorry, actually, Dan Blackroad was here first. He's a bit mean, this guy. I don't know about him. He's 100% right about Mozza, but some of the other stuff he says, it's pretty crook. Lethal Lightning, totally agree. That's a true statement. And see, Dan Blackroad says some true things sometimes. Russell Coight helped build Wakanda. Any Americans out there, if you don't know who Russell Coight is, quick YouTube search. You'll have some fun with that. So Jade Shadow is here. What up, my knitter? How are you? How's it going? Trey, thanks for being here, mate. Trey's a great dude. Always looking out for him in the chat. He always keeps the conversation going. Blabbering Collector's here. Thanks. I think she's my latest subscriber. Oh, and I wanted to say thank you. I think I just hit 51. So thank you, everyone, for that. I know I've been just sort of meandering through, not doing that many streams, but I've hijacked a laptop, so I should be able to go for at least a little while in the foreseeable future. But yes, it really just limped past the Dark World, which is pretty much the universal dumpster fire of the MCU, even when the MCU was still considered pretty strong and growing. That was the first sort of real misfire that they had. Oh my God, look at this. Look at this. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. And I mean, Ragnarok was successful for what it was, but coming off those movies, Thor really should have had a bigger boost. But Ragnarok, I think a lot of people weren't used to the humor, so they found it kind of new, or it was definitely very different to the humor in a lot of other movies, especially mainstream Hollywood movies. It's a bit closer to home to the humor that is in a lot of New Zealand movies, particularly, not just his movies, but a lot of the independent New Zealand movies sort of have that same sort of feel to them. A little bit as well of the Australian ones, but he's definitely got a style, and I think it works maybe as a one-off in a big sort of tentpole property, but continued work, I think it just sort of falls by the wayside. Hyperlethal's here. We're kind of forever. It's always good to see. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about that now as well. I actually really like that trailer. I don't think the movie's going to be particularly great, but I think for what they were trying to do, the trailer works. And also with the recast, also, but I don't think they're going to do anything particularly good with Namor, especially the complete changes from the comic books. I know they're trying to adapt it more into real world or real MCU world, but to go that far away from the original character, I think you're almost going into the realm of why even have Namor in the story if that's the direction you're going to go. But with the recast T'Challa thing, one of the things I think the Wakanda Forever trailer works is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You've got a guy who was pretty good in the role. I mean, a lot of people didn't like Black Panther. I didn't really like Black Panther, but I didn't not like his performance as Black Panther. I thought when he got the chance on screen in the movie Black Panther, he was really good. I thought he was one of the best parts of Civil War. I thought he was really good in Infinity War. But if you don't recast him, you leave that character as a whole in the universe. I think what they're doing is you're kind of parking that character for a movie. He's going to probably disappear or sort of die in the movie. It's discovered he's not really dead, but when he comes back in the future of the MCU, he is recast. But you need to give it a little bit of space between his real life passing and replacing him in the movie altogether. And I get that he's a like the argument is that, like, would you do that same sort of thing with Spider-Man and stuff? Well, Spider-Man, you'd probably like you I mean, the direct example is probably of a real world one is probably Heath Ledger's Joker. They could have recast him in that third film and had a storyline where the Joker was still in Gotham, involved in that storyline. But for Heath, I think it's better off that you left that character alone. And it's kind of similar with Black Panther. You kind of you have to give it at least a little bit of time before you do, because if you do just move on, I mean, you can accuse Marvel of being callous and just moving straight past the character. But then on the other hand, if they don't, you can accuse them of kind of what they're doing, kind of what they're getting accused of now is milking the death of Chadwick to push this movie, which I get. And you can definitely say that. But to straight up recast him straight away, I think you've got a lot of room to move before you have to decide what to do for certain with that character. I don't think that's a true statement. I think if Blabs hated Wakanda, I think Wakanda would know about it. Why Popo take over Wakanda? That's in the Moza arc of the manga. That haven't been they haven't done that in the anime yet, but that's coming. That's in the Moza arc of the manga, and that's on the way. I hate Wakanda. I don't particularly like the portrayal of Wakanda in the movies, especially the movie Black Panther. I think it was it just felt like it was one small street. I think they improved a bit on that in Infinity War, but yeah, Wakanda as a, like, if you say Gotham as a character in itself, Wakanda as a character in itself was pretty lame. Taika should stay away. Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, if you just change it so fundamentally, it just becomes a different character completely. Yeah, for representation. I mean, you still could have had representation with that character. It's just not real world. You just cast a what they'd call a diverse actor in the role, and you still base them saying they're from Atlantis or I mean, the person who I always thought was a would be a, this is probably 10 years too late, but the person I always thought would have been a great Namor is Daniel Day Kim. He's done a lot of TV work. He was in Angel as one of the lawyers. He was in Lost as Jin. And I think after that he was in Hawaii Five-0, the remake show, for a while. But I always thought he had a really similar look to Namor, and some of his episodes in Lost, I thought that character could definitely translate pretty well. See, I think they definitely will and should recast, but I just don't think they should do it straight away. You do it straight away, you run the risk of almost brushing past Chadwick Boseman's legacy in the character. But if you give it a little bit of time, I think they'll definitely bring the character back as recast in the future. Yeah. Yeah, I think that. Well, I think they're already pretty much immune to criticism with this movie. I mean, if you're being honest, I mean, Chadwick Boseman dying, this kind of being the next legacy movie for him. You've got a pretty strong female cast. You've got a pretty Hollywood standard diverse cast, and you've got Disney backing them. So I think to say that they're going to use anything to ignore criticism, yeah, they're going to completely ignore criticism, because it's almost criticism proof in the media's eyes anyway. I mean, lol, ha 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 ha, lol, ha 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 ha. You are a weird man, Mozza. Yeah, well, I mean, I always thought Namor very much looked in that sort of Asian, I mean, Latin America as well, in some of the way he's portrayed. But yeah, very much a a comic book version of an Asian looking person. But yeah, he's and it's not just because Daniel Day Kim was Asian. I also thought his physicality as well. He really looked like Namor. There was a lot of, I mean, it might have just been because he was standing on the beach in a lot of the shots in Lost, but he's standing on the beach a lot, and it sort of reminded me a lot of the comic panels and pages where you see Namor. He had like sort of a very proud stance where he was standing there. Well, yes, that's definitely one option, not doing Black Panther 2 so soon. But I think with the success of the first one, they're very much wanting a second one. Whether they should be or not, that's a very different question. Yeah, not just but I think Chadwick's the he's definitely the pushing point of the movie, but with everything else diverse in it, that's a landmine, that movie waiting to happen. Anyway, so let's get a little bit into the DC stuff. Episode 5 of Wakanda Forever will be top tier. It will be top tier in Moz's eyes because everything Moz sees as episode 5 is pretty good. But then again, Moz is a retard, so it all fits. Okay. So let's start a little bit with the DC stuff. Firstly, I wanted to speak a bit about how I think DC went wrong, particularly with the movies following the Dark Knight trilogy. I mean, yeah, this is true. Exactly. It's not just the Snyderverse. There was also people seem to forget it or just maybe erase it completely from their mind. But there was a Green Lantern movie, which, from all reports, lost DC or Warner Brothers something in the vicinity of $150 million, which is pretty good coming straight off the bat with your first solo effort after Batman. Pretty solid outing. Ryan Reynolds, I mean, he's gone on to be successful in Deadpool, but in a world, I think he could have been a Hal Jordan, but I don't think it was in this world. So anyway, I just wanted to briefly touch on Green Lantern because that was the first, I think, real mistake that DC and Warner Brothers made moving forward, outside of the Nolan trilogy, which I'm a big fan of. Batman Begins wasn't the most successful Batman movie, but it laid a foundation that brought people back that was needed after Batman and Robin, and that's one of the things that really that's really hurt DC over the years is establishing really good franchises and then completely ruining them with movies that go off the rails. I mean, within 3 movies, pretty much, you all right to get 2 pretty decent ones, and then 3 and 4, if they get that far, completely off the hill. I mean, that pedigree goes back to Superman, the original, well, not the original, but Superman the movie, Christopher Reeve. 1 and 2, not too bad. All-time classic, number 1. And you've got 3 and 4, which I'd like 4 for what it is. A goofy Superman movie, but in the pantheon of the character of Superman, that set the character back, those movies, and you didn't see the character again for quite a while. I mean, you saw him again on TV, but then in the movie form, that's a long break. And it was the same with Batman. You had 89 and then Batman Returns. And I think actually Moz is he's up to, I think, Batman 72. He's going through all the Batmans 1 to 89. But when he gets there, I don't want to spoil it, but when he gets there, Batman 89 and Batman Returns really brought the character back into the mainstream. And then you had movies like Forever and Batman and Robin completely tanked it again. And you have to completely keep building up the goodwill with the fan base and with the audience to keep bringing them back for new versions of them. And you've kind of got the same thing here, in my opinion. I know there's people in the chat that like the Snyderverse and what they were doing with Man of Steel and BVS and those sort of things. But when you look at the numbers for what in that era superhero movies were doing, and you look at what Marvel started out with, a blank slate pretty much. They had characters that almost no one had heard of outside of comic book fans. I mean, the most popular character in the Avengers movie was probably the Hulk, historically. No one really cared about Captain America, Iron Man, Thor. I don't think anyone would have even really heard of Black Widow or Hawkeye or even Nick Fury. You've got characters that have been built up in movies and granted built back down again in movies. Superman, Batman, they were always the pinnacle of DC and comic book film characters up until probably the first Spider-Man or the first iteration of the Spider-Man movies came out with Tobey Maguire. I think Spider-Man after the 90s and then those movies, I think they've done polls and market research and stuff about it, that Spider-Man as a face is the most recognizable pop culture character ahead of Batman now. And it's pretty much just to do with the mask and the way it's designed. And then you've got, I think, Superman third, which is, I think, the most recognizable human face, depicted human face next to Jesus Christ, is the drawing of how Superman is usually depicted. So you've got pretty iconic characters in Batman and Superman. And Man of Steel, actually, I don't hate that movie. I hate aspects of it. I hate what they did to certain characters in it. I hate what the strange sort of Revenge of the Sith, General Grievous's base aspect to Krypton, with the whole the weird lizards and Jor-El fighting Zod early in the movie. Because I don't actually have a problem with him fighting Zod. I have a problem with him beating Zod in the movie, because they kind of, in their own canon in the movie and lore, they say that all the people are specifically designed for very certain things. And this dude's a scientist, and he's fighting a guy who's literally bred for war, and he's beaten the shit out of him. In the first 10 minutes of the movie, your main villain, which is actually, I think, is a theme for why I hate another one of Zack Snyder's movies. His Snyder Cut of Justice League is, you have the villain, the first time you see them, you have the villain beaten, and you kind of take away any stakes or intimidation the character has for the rest of the movie in any real aspect, because you've seen him beaten already. So why wouldn't you assume you're just going to see him beaten again? And it was with Zod, and I think he does it later on with Darkseid. In spoilers if you haven't seen it, Snyder Cut, the first time you see Darkseid, who they always refer to as Darkseid, and I know he is not supposed to be Darkseid yet, but he's referred to solely as Darkseid during this time. He gets his ass kicked, and it is a group effort, but it is mainly the people doing the damage to him, because he just kills one of the Green Lantern dudes, which is apparently Abin Sur. I don't know how that timeline works out, but okay. I believe it was Ares and Zeus. Zeus was sort of doing the electric charge at him, and then Ares comes in and sort of slashes him, and they carry him away, sort of on a stretcher, pretty much. And I find it, because I found it similar, because I had comments in, I can't remember whose chat it was, but I was making comments about it, and it was I found it strange because, yes, this is your biggest character in the movie, and he's already defeated once. And it was by people who, well, not by one in particular, Ares. And in the timeline of that circumstance, because I believe originally Justice League was meant to come out after Wonder Woman. So I think Justice League would have shown the big bad of the all movies essentially defeated by the person who Wonder Woman had just defeated in the movie before, which I didn't think made much sense, but the timeline was a bit nebulous. All the delays and everything that happened with that movie, and when it was originally going to be brought out and everything like that. But sure, I get that, because one of the comments I was saying was, in contrast, that you have Thanos beaten, Thor, Loki, Heimdall, and then the Hulk. The first time you see Thanos physically interact with anyone, because you see him in his little chair. He does his little turnaround in Avengers, and then in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then you see him pick up his gauntlet and stuff. But the first time he actually physically interacts with any characters, he lays waste to 3 gods and basically Earth's version of a green god. And in contrast, you've got Darkseid being beaten by 2 gods also. And that was the comment I made, as Darkseid was just beaten. And the person said, by 2 gods. I'm like, sure, but Darkseid is meant to be a certain of a stature of a god himself almost. And then in the other sort of direct comparison movies, the Avengers movies, and their building up of a big bad, you have Thanos laying waste to established characters that you know, and so it's kind of like power scaling. You already know their power levels if you take it back to like a Dragon Ball sort of level. You've got Thanos laying waste to 3 gods and then an Earth god. So one of the things, because that's I think one of the knocks against Marvel has been the villains. That they're either too samey to the hero, or they're not very well fleshed out and they're just gone after that. And that's my exact problem with Man of Steel. You've got Superman by the end of the movie just fighting another version of Superman, and he kills him and he's gone. Sure, he comes back as Teenage Mutant Ninja Cave Troll in BVS, but apart from it's just a one and done character. Zod gone. I think they missed an opportunity, not just to kind of explore more of the Krypton aspect of it. They glossed over a pretty cool villain and storyline. Just to sort of end the movie, if you will, and Marvel's done it as well. It's not just this movie, because it is one of the knocks of Marvel, just sort of getting rid of the villain at the end, because either you don't know how to write him out of it, or you don't see him having a future in the franchise. But Zod was one I thought could have had a future in the franchise. It's difficult to figure out a way to, how do you deal with Zod by the end of that movie, but Phantom Zone him, whatever. But I think killing him was a mistake. I don't think Superman killing people necessarily is a mistake. I mean, sure, Superman shouldn't murder people, but I think Superman, it's definitely got to be the last resort for the character. But I don't think it's the end of the universe as a film universe, or as a character, if Superman kills his villain at the end of the movie. But just maybe not Zod so early. And yeah, the other problem I had with it was Jonathan Kent. I thought Jonathan Kent as a character was a very strange choice for someone to shepherd Superman into this world, or Clark Kent, because I know there is that debate. But to me, it's I know it's called Man of Steel, but it's like that line in Avengers, Hawkeye to Scarlet Witch. Like, you go out that door, you're an Avenger. Superman, he puts on that suit, he is Superman. I don't care what anyone says. He's not Man of Steel, or he's not Clark Kent anymore. He puts on the Superman suit, he is Superman. But yeah. So anyway, my little rant about Man of Steel aside, I don't hate the movie. I just hate aspects of it. I think it was executed to a degree pretty competently. The end of the movie, I think there is so many so many different ways you could structure that to because you could honestly, if you're a filmmaker and you can't see that that's gonna I know I don't know, it didn't piss everyone off, but it definitely it's going to piss the Superman purists off that he's literally flying with Zod through buildings, and not because that's not really my problem with it. My problem is that how is it's staged and executed. There is such a better way you could do that, where you have him scanning buildings as he's going with his X-ray vision. He's like they do it in Dragon Ball. Like, Goku flies up and he's like, we're leaving the city. You can't necessarily do that in the movie, but he's definitely steering the fight to a specific place. But I felt there was too much just Michael Bay smashing and like in the Transformers, just metal smashing against each other. There was too much of that sort of visual effects, and it gets tiresome. But apart from that, I didn't really have too many problems with the fundamental sides of it. I mean, Perry White change, that's weird, but okay. I thought the female character in it was kind of pointless or redundant when you have a Jimmy Olsen character in that pantheon of characters that you could have used. I thought that character just could have easily been Jimmy Olsen, Perry White's kind of assistant person. Amy Adams as Lois. I think one of the problems I have with the Snyderverse in general is Zack Snyder's casting choices. I think Amy Adams as Lois, while she's not a bad actress, but as Lois Lane, I think you've got way too many past actresses that have done such a good job that you can look at and kind of base as a template. And I think Amy Adams is, I mean, if that was the choice they were making, to go as far away from those sort of actresses and performances you can, I think then Amy Adams was a good choice. But I mean, to me, the two best Lois Lanes that have ever been on screen are Margot Kidder and Terry Hatcher. I think they are kind of the epitome of both sides of what Lois Lane as a character can be. Like the sort of more mousy, kind of always looking for Superman for his help and stuff from the movies that Margot sort of portrayed. And then you've got the Terry Hatcher, more of the investigator, kind of getting into trouble more, and Superman having to always bail her out kind of thing. I think those two portrayals are probably the best I've seen. But yeah, and Henry Cavill, I mean, for what he got to do, I think he was a decent Superman. And Clark Kent, I just would have liked to seen his portrayal if he had more if the movie was allowed to have more optimism and hope in it, I think I think there's some flashes where Henry Cavill could have been, well, like for me, considered one of the great Supermen, but I think that's pretty much past. But I want to just catch up on the chat a bit, and then I'll get into some of the box office stuff because I completely ignored the chat. DC, yeah, and that's one of the things I'll get into later is when they say that there's the reset coming in DC is like they say that, but when will that happen? Because in my opinion, it's not going to happen until they've gotten through this current slate of Black Adam, Flash, Shazam, Aquaman, and then there's news that the Batman 2 is apparently coming, but we'll see. I mean, I think they're kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what'll stick with that sort of thing. But with all the cancellations, sure, it's will anything be left by the end of it? And will they even have any money to promote these things? No, they at the moment, and for a while it's been kind of history for DC for a long time, going in too many different directions and hoping for the best. But yeah, with all this news that they want to come back and reset and almost sort of streamline the movies, kind of like in the MCU model, then we'll see if they can actually have the discipline to stick to it this time. No, I don't blame Reynolds for the movie. I blame the script completely, and I blame the script. It was two movies in one. It was an origin story, and then coming back to Earth and protecting its story and against Parallax. And it was just it was a mess. But that's when we're going to get into BVS soon. That's one of my problems with that movie too. I think for a long time, DC's tried to put too many comic book stories together into one movie to try and make it work. Yeah, it was it's my favorite in the trilogy, definitely. I still enjoy The Dark Knight, and I still like Dark Knight Rises. I just think it has a lot of issues, but Batman Begins I don't have too many issues with, as Nolan was trying to do, like as real world a take on Batman as he could. You have to take certain liberties with things, and I get people that that have issues with it as an actual sort of Batman movie and sort of film. But I think almost if you take the Batman parts out of it, it's still a pretty cool movie. They got away with Lethal Weapon. All four were good. It is one of my. I mean, I think there's only two franchises that I love. I like all the movies in it, and Lethal Weapon's one of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I even like 4 as nearly as much as I like the first movie. And Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future is another one where I really enjoy all three movies. 1 and 3 more than 2, but I don't hate 2. I just love 1 and 3. And Indiana Jones was there until they made 4, and then they're making 5. So, and Die Hard was there until they made Die Hard 4 and Die Hard 5, which is not a Christmas movie, but Die Hard 1 is a Christmas movie. I don't know if anyone's seen it in the chat, but Die Hard 1 is a great Christmas movie, and so is Lethal Weapon 1. Spider-Man is the face of Marvel, yeah, and has been basically since his inception, pretty much. There's always been like people that come up and take that sort of title for a few years and stuff, and Wolverine had it for a little while. Venom had it for a while. Iron Man had it for a while when the movies first came out in Avengers, and he was basically the face of the MCU. But I think traditionally and moving forward, Spider-Man is that rock and foundation. Man of Steel Fire, yeah, I know people will love it. If there was certain things changed, I think it's the framework of a really great Superman movie. It's just way too dark a take on the universe and the character. I mean, to me, that's a movie you do after you've already established the character and the universe. Like you can take them down a dark path almost. Kind of, I mean, they don't do it quite that way, but kind of like they do in Iron Man 3, or kind of a lesser extent Iron Man 2 with the demon in the bottle sort of wink or glance at, because they don't really do the story. They just kind of glance at the story. But that's a holdover from what was previously going to be that movie. You've got, Man of Steel. I think as the origin story part, kind of decent. Take off Krypton and that sort of stuff, but a lot of the other stuff surrounding it, not too much. No, I don't even think they really should have named him at all in the movie. I mean, how does Wonder Woman know who the fuck he is? He's, how did they, and how did they lose the planet? How do you lose a planet, especially when you get your ass kicked on the planet? Supposedly the only time ever, and we'll just wipe that one off the GPS. Yeah, I know. I don't think they do it as much as people complain they do, but I see some of the same problems with DC, and especially Man of Steel, because it is basically just Superman trying to fight another Superman. Yeah, I know. I believe Superman was doing that. I just don't think the film portrayed it either well enough or enough to sort of satisfy what Superman would. I mean, because I think he'd be a lot more frantic in that sort of situation of trying to do it. But I understand, he's in a fight and everything, but I think there's just ways, and it's not necessarily steering the fight. I just think Superman himself had ways that he could have, and the filmmaker had ways that Superman could have visually shown, no one in this building, X-ray vision as he's going towards it with Zod, and then you have the impact of him going through. It's just, they're small fixes, but I think if you take them out, it makes it much more of a brutal and mean-spirited movie than it needed to be, especially with how dark of the overall tone of it was. I think they just sort of kept pushing it too far in a direction it didn't always need to go. Well, I mean, Perry White isn't a minor character in that movie. He was, yes, but in the overall pantheon of the Superman story, Perry White isn't a minor character. I mean, he's kind of like a secondary father to Clark Kent in some stories when Jonathan Kent has passed away. One of my favorite portrayals of the Superman character is the Lois and Clark show from the 90s with Dean Cain. And although Superman's father in that hasn't passed like he does in the comic books so early, Perry White's still like a very much kind of like a father figure to Clark Kent. And I think it's a good relationship. Yeah, definitely. Oh yes, and I was talking mainly about on live action, but yeah, the Superman animated series, they've had some great lows. Not just the one in the '90s. There's the old Fleischer one. There's a lot of great Superman cartoons over the years. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like it's another one of these Batman movies, which I'll get to soon once I catch up a bit more on the chat. Um, like BVS, it was another movie with Batman that had diminishing returns from the one before it. So to continue it is, in my opinion, lunacy. But that's Warner Brothers. Still haven't watched that. Fuck Batman 2. Fuck the first one. Yeah, I still haven't seen the first Aquaman either. So that's what's going for it. Yeah, that's the thing. Green Lantern, the origin story should have just been going back to the Oa and the Green Lantern Corps, and you save all that parallax and coming back to. I mean, you can come back to Earth, but you save all that. Earth is in peril stuff. I can't even remember the name of the dude. It was the other villain in it. But it was a pretty poor attempt at the character. No, I haven't seen the third one. I've seen the first two. I wasn't the hugest fan, but I'm not really a fan of that kind of horror, especially kind of zombie movies in general. But I mean, it's not like a typical zombie movie. But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of those. But I want to see the third one because the third one actually looks pretty up my alley. Hey Jack, how you going? Chucky franchise, that's another one. I've only seen, I think, the first few, and after that, they kind of just all fell by the wayside for me. Aquaman. Well, I've heard it's sort of the most out of like those early sort of Snyder movies. It's kind of the most like a Marvel movie, I guess. But I mean, I'm a fan of the Marvel movies, but that's not going to really get me to watch it because I just think they fundamentally change that character too much to where he kind of just is dude bro from the water. But yeah, I'll get back into it because yes, Man of Steel, I think it was roughly around 650 million or something worldwide at the box office, which for the time's pretty good for a Superman reestablishing that character. I think they wanted a lot more because the marketing on that movie was incredibly overspent. So when you're looking at a normal cost return for that, for what you put in, usually on the budget, that movie blew that out of the water with what they needed to get back over a normal break-even point. That movie was pretty much nearly destined to fail from the get-go unless it hit at least $750-800 million. That's why I think they panicked and then they scrambled to get BVS or to insert Batman into the Superman movie and not make it a straight up Man of Steel sequel. They scrambled. They got Ben Affleck. They built a quick framework together to get a Flash movie, or a Flash character, the Wonder Woman character, and the Aquaman character, and the Cyborg idea set in place, so they could do those little flashcards in BVS. But that was, to me, that's part of the problem where you've got already a movie that was not particularly well planned from the get-go, rushed to become another movie, and then inside that other movie. You're using it as a launching pad for a Wonder Woman movie. Um, and yes, folks, the Flash movie that is still yet to release and has no apparent release date or confidence that the main actor will even be in that movie anymore was started and planned back in 2014, I believe. Was the first production ideas for the Flash movie as a solo movie moving forward. So that's quite a long time, even for Hollywood's terms. For superhero movie terms, that's ridiculous. I mean, I think Ant-Man was probably one of the closest ones in recent years anyway, the Edgar Wright sort of Ant-Man movie that became what it was. But you're going back a long way before you see anything similar to those sorts of things in the superhero comic books world side of movies. But if you look at BVS, it was basically the storyline of elements of The Dark Knight Returns mixed with elements of the death of Superman. And either one of those by themselves would make great movies. Mashing them together, it makes no sense, and you've kind of muddied the water of those two story ideas to, if you like, you've taken them out of the picture almost completely for that Snyderverse moving forward, doing a proper death of Superman storyline or doing a proper Dark Knight Returns storyline. You've just taken them both off the books immediately. Two movies that should be $1 billion by themselves, you've squashed into a movie that barely made $850 million with two flagship characters where one of them, not less than 5 to 7 years before that, was two $1 billion movies in a row. So I mean, I was talking about before and the last stream, going backwards with the character in Thor, going backwards in a character like Batman twice now, with from the Bale to the Affleck to the Pattinson. You've regressed that character in popularity twice. And I think that's, I mean, part of it is the Batgirl, I think, getting canned is you don't want more damage to be done to the Bat brand of DC, because, I mean, if you have looked at any comic books for the last probably, 15, 20 years from DC, there's a lot of Batman titles. Like Batman, the Bat family sells a lot of merchandise and books traditionally, historically, for DC, and to continually destroy that brand, or to not, I mean, there's still fans of it for sure, and people like those movies, so I'm not going to say they're destroying the brand, but to continually downgrade that brand is extreme danger signs for Warner Brothers and DC. Because it can't, sometimes it can't be helped. Superman suffered greatly over the years, I think, with those sort of wilderness years, like the early 2000s up until like through the Superman Returns sort of phase, and through a lot of the 90s. Besides Lois and Clark on TV, there wasn't a lot of Superman in the mainstream, and there was still always the books and stuff, but there was always a lot more Batman titles than there were Superman ones. And I mean, to me, I'm a Batman fan, but I mean, Superman is the flagship. I mean, you can say they both are, but Superman's the original, and Superman is the pinnacle, like not just of the DC world in stories, but in the DC brand, I think. But it's like Spider-Man. He wasn't the first, but that popularity stays around. And Superman, he wasn't the first, but Batman just really took that throne from him. And especially since the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman was, I think, more popular than ever when those movies were out. But yeah, so you've got BVS, kind of like a weird amalgam of movies, too much in one. To me, like they're saying a formula to follow now is the Marvel one, but you could have done that back then. Had a solo Flash movie, had a solo Aquaman movie, and then you have your solo Wonder Woman movie, all around that before you got to that Justice League movie. I think DC was definitely just chasing Marvel. The Avengers kind of Marvel DC. I think DC sort of saw the Marvel Studios as sort of quaint and cute, like they're establishing not just their characters but their universe through those movies. But I think when Avengers came out and hit over $1 billion and did what it did box office wise, I think that sort of made DC kind of go, hey, we've got that team here, we need to do that. And I think they sort of just really jumped the gun and ran straight to that instead of doing kind of what Marvel did with that and building it up. And granted, Marvel only made 3 solo movies, or 3 character solo movies before they got to Avengers. But DC, with how, the characters that Marvel didn't have in those, didn't have the solo movies that were in the Avengers movies, were human level shield agents. They were interspersed into the other movies, like very Hawkeye very sporadically, and Black Widow more so in Iron Man 2. But I think to establish characters of that sort of magnitude, like Flash, Aquaman, you need those solo movies for them to fully establish themselves in the universe and not just be kind of bit players in a Justice League movie, or even a 4-hour cut of it. But for the main part, I think BVS started the absolute devastation of the casting for the Snyderverse, and it's still being felt today. Ezra Miller, Jason Momoa, Gal Gadot, so she wasn't in it. Amber Heard wasn't in it yet, but I believe she was possibly cast at the time or not long after, because they were planning to go into the Justice League movie not too long after that, and she was going to be part of that, the original Justice League with Zack Snyder and everything. But yes, I think the actual starting of the casting of Ezra Miller, especially, that has pretty much ended any hope of a cohesive end or restart in the Flashpoint. The only way I can see them going forward with Ezra Miller is if he basically is committed legally insane and is paraded through the media basically as a as a redemption story for whatever it is, a year and a half, 2 years till whenever this movie comes out, if they shelve it that long still. But you've just got to completely recast T'Challa, recast Flash. That is one of the biggest things that should be facing DC right now, is probably what to do with that movie and Ezra Miller. But yeah, those problems stem back to the casting back then. And I mean, sure, Zack Snyder can't predict those sort of things, but as a character, Ezra Miller never fitted Barry Allen's Flash. I don't think Jason Momoa fits Aquaman. I don't think Gal Gadot is particularly great Wonder Woman. I mean, she's an absolutely terrible actress. I think the fact that they had to change everyone's accent to suit her in Wonder Woman was kind of a hindrance to the movie overall, having everyone sound like the Swedish Chef from the Muppets. But that's beside the point. But BVS, so you've got about 850 million with that one. It was one of those movies where it was on pace to hit $1 billion, but from the opening. But it was, I think, the one that really soured a lot of the fan base on the Snyderverse going forward. And I know there was a lot of, all the hashtags and everything, restore the Snyderverse. But in my opinion, as many of those hashtags as there was another person that didn't want that to happen. They just weren't as organized online doing it. And it kind of showed in the box office results, because they never really had any success until he was gone, and they retooled Aquaman into more of the lighthearted MCU kind of movie that they wanted for that movie. That was their first $1 billion hit in the what you'd call the Snyderverse. I mean, I guess it's still technically all the Snyderverse, all the movies with those characters that he makes. It's just he's not a part of it anymore. But the success that was from BVS, I'm not going to say the movie failed. It definitely made money. I don't know how much money it made, because it was another one where it was very expensive to make, and it also had I don't know historically if it had a bit as big a marketing budget as Man of Steel did, but it definitely is one of those ones where it had a huge presence online, everywhere, advertising that movie coming out. I mean, I was there midnight screening first Wednesday before it opened here in Australia to see it, and it's one of the most disappointing cinema experiences of my life, because I was looking forward to it. I was hoping it was going to be great, and there were so many things that I just thought, as a movie, not just as an adaptation of comic book stories or anything, putting two very strange fitting stories together. As a movie executed, I thought it was very poorly acted. I thought that was another one of the bad casting choices. I thought Jesse Eisenberg, I thought he was his choices as Lex were not just perplexing, but almost, see what I did there? Perplexing. They weren't in any way. There was zero intimidation. I know he wasn't an intimidating version of Lex, but there wasn't even anything really sinister about him. I thought everything about him was just goofy and juvenile. I didn't think he was a worthy villain again. But at least he wasn't a copy. That's what I'll give them. He was just a kind of a nothing villain. But then you had the literal evolution of Zod coming out of the cocoon as Doomsday, which I thought the fight itself was pretty cool. Just the character design for Doomsday was really strange. The forced conflict in the movie between Batman and Superman, I thought was something that it wasn't just that it wasn't needed. It was it hurt the movie. I know the movie's called Batman v Superman, but literally having them have a fight like that and a conflict like that through the movie, I thought there's no good endpoint for this going forward. This is all too soon. A conflict like this before they've even established a relationship, and then because it happened like I thought it would, because the turn back is too quick. The turn, well, not even back. The turn towards the friendship is it's just too forced and too quick. It happens just for plot reasons instead of being an organic friendship that forms, or because I mean in DC Comics that's one of the biggest, longest running friendships in the comic books is Bruce and Clark and Superman and Batman. And the whole Snyderverse, it's you're robbing yourself of future stories by doing all this so suddenly, straight away. But I mean, I know a lot. A lot of it wasn't him. A lot of it, the studio was pushing for these things, having the Batman in the movie and trying to almost catch up to the Avengers, and then at the time Civil War. But I thought it's one of those things where it's too much too soon, and I think that's a lot of what I take away from the Snyderverse. A lot of it was too much too soon, and I think a lot of it that was to do with the catch up aspect to Marvel at the time, where they almost just completely needed to look inwards at what they were doing and not look at anything else that was happening outside them in the comic book movie realm. And also you've got in the background the supposed there was going to be the Injustice League. Like you had the I think there was the end credit scene where he meets him on a boat or something. I'm not sure if that was from that one or if that was from if that was an end credit scene or if that was just actually at the end of the movie, because it has been a long time since I've seen it. And I haven't seen the actual theatrical version since the theater. I've only seen the extended version since that, which is admittedly better. But I mean, if I gave BVS a 5, I'd probably give the extended version of 5.5, because while it gives some context to some things, I also think it makes other things even more confusing to what is actually happening. And Batman is kind of a moron in the movie to be outsmarted by Lex like that, in my opinion. And then Wonder Woman, which as a movie, I hate. I think it is all the worst parts of Captain America and Thor 1 and 2 rolled together into a poorly acted and poorly executed CGI, third act CGI fest. The first 2 acts are just Captain America and Thor 1. And yeah, the end is just the complete CGI shitfest that was Thor: The Dark World is just rolled up into one act and put into the third act of Wonder Woman. And I know people enjoy that movie, and by all account, it was one of the most successful. I mean, it wasn't. People like to think it was, but it wasn't more successful than BVS was. It actually made a little bit less money than BVS overall. But as a solo outing for Wonder Woman, first time ever, that's pretty decent. But again, it was another one where to me, I always thought the easy fix, because it was another one where I thought they killed off one of the best characters in the Wonder Woman mythos, which is Steve Trevor. That relationship that those two have in the potential relationship that those two can have in the movies is just reduced to one movie already. You've got, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he dies in the CGI shitfest tornado. And I'm like, you're in a world of, like, a literal god, fantastical elements and stuff. There are ways you can pluck a character out of time, and I was kind of thought they were doing this with the second movie, instead of just having him be like an illusion over someone or whatever, like hijacking someone's body or whatever and being raped by one woman. You can just almost magic him out of that plane before it crashed. I was going to, like Zeus, a bolt of lightning comes down, and if, I can't even remember if Zeus was still around in the universe canonically when Wonder Woman took place. But, a bolt of lightning takes him and it transports him automatically. He's already 50, 60 years in the future or something. And then when the story picks up, then, she finds him again once she catches up to that timeline or whatever. Even I was thinking, just give him have a Green Lantern ring, fly into the plane as he's there, land on his finger, and zips him off to Oa, and that's where he goes. It was just another one of, they've taken another really great character. Oh, like I forgot they did in BVS. Jimmy Olsen killed immediately. They took another great character with Steve Trevor, and they've killed them way too soon in the potential storyline. But I mean, these are all sort of story problems and more things I have, problems I have wrong with the movie personally. But when you look at the box office for that era, these were when movies were expected to make $1 billion. And I know this is sort of the, if you would call it, the phase one of the DC film slate. This, like Marvel had, this was a pretty successful foray into movies, if you just called it a phase one. But the problem is that they're building off legacies of characters that Marvel didn't. So when you're looking at those numbers for the input they're putting in, they weren't box office failures, but they were, I'd say, they were failures in what they needed to do to push the franchise forward, or to push the film universe forward. And I mean, whether that's right or wrong, that's up to anyone. But that's what the studio, I think that's what the studio thought. And the studio was in that mindset of $1 billion for these characters is a minimum. And for Man of Steel and Wonder Woman, I think that's kind of harsh. But for BVS, I think $1 billion is minimum for a movie that stars a Batman and a Superman prominently, and advertised that way, not just like you find out there's a Superman cameo or a Superman or a Batman cameo in the movie later on. It was marketed prominently as this is the first time ever on film that Batman and Superman will be seen together. I mean, that alone should sell the movie $1 billion. easy. But the fact it didn't, I think that's why you got the balk when it came to Justice League, and the timeline is up in the air for what you want to believe from the reports and everything. But I mean, Zack was pretty much out the door as that movie was in Warner Brothers' minds. I mean, Zack was pretty much out the door kind of as that movie even started to go into production. And I think the longer they went on, the more nervous they got. And circumstances hit. And I think they were given an out and they took it and they used that as a media softening to remove Zack from those pictures, from those from Justice League and ones going forward. But from everything I remember from back then, Joss Whedon was already in the production before Zack ever left. He was what Warner Brothers wanted to do was lighten it up a bit and kind of, I guess, if you bring in Joss Whedon, the dude who's just come off Avengers 1 and 2, you, I guess, in a better, for lack of a better phrase, you bring him to marvel it up a bit. And from there, you've got the absolute dumpster fire box office wise that was Justice League. I mean, talk about going backwards with characters. That was you had all just had 3 solo films with those characters. Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, and all of them did better than the Justice League. And that's, I mean, granted, not that much better. I mean, it was, I think Man of Steel was about, I think possibly like not that much, like negligible in terms of how much money they're making higher. You've got Wonder Woman and BVS roughly, I think it was about 200 million more, maybe 150 to 200 million dollars more, around about there. But yes, and for a Justice League, I mean, there was the whole. I don't think a lot of the Snyder fans were going to see the, as they call it, as you know, as people call it, the Justice League. But even apart from that, I don't think. I mean, in reality, 80% of the film-going audience doesn't even know that Zack Snyder was replaced in that movie, and that it's the Justice League now, or any of that stuff is happening behind the scenes. So it was just kind of like the progression of the franchise where that was going. I mean, if Zack was involved, definitely, I think it would have probably made more. How much more? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of years later, but I mean, people say his Snyder cut sort of moved the needle, but I'm kind of skeptical on those numbers, especially when a lot of the reporting's in-house. And from a lot of the numbers I've seen, it's kind of mixed of the people who started watching it to actually finished it to the end of it. So I think you've got a lot of the online, I guess you'd call like sort of passionate or interested in learning or being knowledgeable about what's actually happening in the film industry at the moment and things that are happening behind the scenes and those sort of things. I think compared to the general movie audience, I think a lot of them weren't as interested in the take as the hardcore fans were. I mean, one of the kind of luxuries the Marvel movies have is they're all kind of they're more palatable. So they do you get a you can get a more of like a family event happening to go see those movies. You can, I guess, in a way, get a bit more mileage out of them in a general setting than you can with the sort of a bit more specific and tailored depiction of those characters in the Snyder universe. But I mean, it is just personal preference overall. But I think looking at the box office of that era, I think it's pretty safe to say that people were choosing the lighter side than they were wanting the almost Elseworlds. I'll say almost Elseworlds take on the characters. But I mean, it is sort of it depends what era books you read, and it depends on how much you like the characters or how much you like the universe. And I mean, like so if you're just you might just be a Batman fan, or you might be a DC fan kind of thing. But anyway, I want to catch up on the chat a little bit more. Some cool shots, but the middle is pretty cringe. If you're talking about Aquaman, I mean, and I hope you are, because I'm going to talk about Aquaman now. It is one of my favorite DC books. Always, to me, Aquaman always has the most potential to be the best DC book, because you've got this setting that pretty much no other DC book has, and almost no other comic book has, besides, like we were talking about before, Marvel with Namor. You've got this underwater setting, and you can do so much more with those backgrounds and have how the character interacts with that world than you can on the surface world. And in the movie, if they didn't have cool shots, because some of my favorite some of the most beautifully drawn comic books from DC I've ever seen, or Aquaman books, a lot of them from the 70s and the 80s, but even that I think some of the New 52 stuff, some of that trench stuff was, that looked really cool. And if you can't make an Aquaman movie and have cool shots in it, I mean, one of my favorite Pixar movies is Finding Nemo, and it's mainly just because all the underwater stuff, it just looks so cool. And I've grown up living next to the beach my entire life, so that might play into it. Oh, for sure. I mean, that's a given, and I'm going to get to it a little bit later, but they're talking about the 10-year plan in this reset. But I'll give a little primer on what I would do if I was in charge of DC for 10 years. Yeah, it's not Marvel, but the way you should approach the building of the world is the same. You don't put the same pieces in the world, but how you like the glue you use, all the nails, all the tools you use, they're all the same. But yeah, and I agree in a point, because I always hear it a lot, like people that say that DC is a lot darker. I mean, a lot of the stuff I read from DC was always really light. It just depends what you're reading, and a lot of the stuff I read from Marvel was always really dark. It just depends a lot on what parts of the universe you're looking into, because a lot of them are very similar. And basically, like when you look at the Kirby stuff, he's basically just telling the same story, jumping from Marvel to DC and sort of back again. And he didn't really care that, the characters were changing. He just wanted to tell his sort of space epic. DC is gods trying to be human. Marvel is humans trying to be gods. Two separate, different ideologies, can't copy each other. Yeah, in a way, but it's not really the characters. It's more the world you're trying to build and the story, because the story should always come first, and then you build the world and the characters around that story. But you have a unique medium with comic books where you don't with a lot of other things you're adapting into films, where it's unique because you can almost choose the character first, and then build the story around that, because you've got so many years of stories to choose from with those characters, and B, you especially if you're doing like a universe, especially if you're doing a universe kind of thing like this, you are looking for the best depiction of those characters that it's going to fit into that universe. But yeah, in a way, I agree. DC Gods is trying to be human, and Marvel is humans trying to be gods. Yeah, Marvel always felt more real world to me in the comic books, and that goes as far as DC naming all their cities fictional places like Metropolis, Gotham, all that sort of stuff. It always felt elseworld to me than like Marvel felt like it was definitely trying to set itself in the real world. Yeah, they're still doing Batman 2, apparently. I'm very skeptical about that because it is just a development writing announcement. Those don't always move forward. And from everything I've heard online and other places, is that movie is a wait and see basis, because they don't exactly know what they're going to do with anything yet. Yeah, Ezra should have been recast. Yeah, that's how Ezra's image is in the media now. But if they try and rehab that image, I think they'll see that they'll think that they'll have other options. Whether that movie does anything is pretty bad. Did I say Deadshot? I meant Deathstroke. I thought they had a scene with those two. Doomsday's original concept was better for this movie. Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of the stuff that comes out before the movie from Zack Snyder is better than his actual movies. Like his trailer for the first trailer for The Watchmen was phenomenal. I didn't think the movie was, but I thought the trailer was. Same with Man of Steel. The US trailer and the international trailer for the Man of Steel, when they came out, were awesome. The international one had Russell Crowe speaking, and the US one had Kevin Costner delivering a similar speech, but different. And they worked really well. And I didn't enjoy the movie as much as I enjoyed the trailers leading up to them. And that was the same with BVS as well. Yeah, they see that's. I mean, the people. It's the problem people have with Marvel, wasting characters. they did it with a lot of the villains early on, and it's part of it's because you can't pay the act. You're not how sure the movie's going to go, so you can't pay those every actor with deals to come back. And as those movies went well, like you've kind of just got to write people off and kill them off because you are like Jeff Bridges. If they knew what Iron Man was going to become, I'm not sure if they would have killed him off in the first movie. I think they would have signed him up and kept him around as least a kind of a background sort of villain or person in the Iron Man world for a while. But a lot of that stuff is just contracts. But when you're knowingly building a world going forward, like they were with those movies, when they got to a certain point, there's no excuse to waste a character in a one and done situation when there is easily at least another movie or two to get out of them. Thank you for being here. Not sure what time it would be there, early or late, but good day or good night, whichever. Yes, I know they're not the same in tone, but they were kind of like DC. They were so desperate to get that Marvel money when they saw what Marvel was sort of becoming at the time, and if they had stayed patient, like they would have. I mean, they would have been there with Marvel at Endgame, kind of thing, like still competing. But that's one of the biggest problems with Warner Brothers has been mismanagement and completely run by just fucking morons for basically 20 years. Like they lucked into a Dark Knight trilogy, and that's basically just because Christopher Nolan was so hungry then to get to the top and succeed as a filmmaker. Back when he first got Batman Begins, because he was just sort of just starting out, and he was on the way up quickly. And I think he kind of saw that as an express ticket to the top, and it worked out well for him. And I don't like all the stuff he does, but I think as a filmmaker, he is one of easily the best that's consistently working today. Hey, Subhuman, how are you? Thanks for being here. So yeah, well, I'm not going to be going too much longer, maybe like sort of another half hour or so. But so I'll want to start to get into a bit of what I've been hearing is the plan is the reset at DC, and it's the 10-year plan that they're going to be bringing out, and how it's not going to be like, I don't think any of the 10-year plan has anything to do with Black Adam, Flash, Shazam, Aquaman, the Batman 2. I don't think any of those things are what they consider this 10-year plan. I think when they're talking about this 10-year plan of the reset, I think they're considering that those movies are already out of the way, finished to come out, and they're almost like a litmus test to what is going to be focused on going forward. I know there's that Blue Beetle one as well. I'm pretty sure like that whole slate will be sort of the final endpoint of this era of DC movies. I mean, if you still call it the Snyderverse or whatever, of the Snyderverse characters, I think this is sort of could be the endpoint, and that's where the 10-year reset could start. And if it is, I'll go into. Yeah, I know they've switched now, because I mean, if you listen to reports, one of them says that DC or Warner Brothers don't actually have enough money to market more than 2 films a year, which, as a major studio company that's just been bought out, or merged with another major product or major entertainment entity, that could be a worrying sign. But especially if you're planning 10 more years of movies. But yeah, there's, I mean, if you're sort of doing like a crystal ball kind of thing, you might look at it like they've switched them around, so it's Black Adam and then Shazam, and those 2 movies have some sort of synergy, like any sane person would have Black Adam and Shazam having some sort of connection in a film universe. But from all intensive purposes, those movies look like they're just not even remotely alike. If you had the crystal ball, you might say that they're going from Black Adam, Shazam, Aquaman, and then Flash is the big reset, Flashpoint. Like they just use that movie and actually have it as a storyline that everything resets, kind of thing. That's one way you could go. But I got into it a little bit last stream with I did like a little DC tangent where I was talking about my kind of idea of what I would do with a 10-year plan for the DC film slate. And I think there's a pretty good blueprint in the show Young Justice. If you've ever seen the cartoon show Young Justice, I highly recommend the first 2 seasons. It got cancelled and then came back for season 3 and 4. In my opinion, nowhere near the quality of season 1 and 2 in either the story ideas and the writing or the animation quality. The first 2 seasons are pretty much unparalleled in Marvel or DC animation for when I think it came out about 12 years ago nearly, or about 10 years ago or something like that. Around that time, it was also Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes, which is another one of my all-time favorite cartoons. And she was just chatting before in the live chat on the stream, but Jade just did a stream about this actually today. Today. About the 10 of the best animated TV shows of all time. And pretty much my entire list was just superhero shows, and Young Justice and Earth's Mightiest Heroes were on there because from that era, the sort of the 2010s, they were the only animated shows I think that were worth watching. And as far as animated shows goes, they're 2 of the best since the golden age of the 90s Fox Kids era. And Young Justice is as Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes is kind of the perfect blueprint, and kind of like 40 to 45% of it was the blueprint for what actually ended up happening in Marvel phase kind of 1 and 2 aspects of it. Young Justice could easily be the same thing for a DC film universe going forward. And I don't mean a complete copying of the story ideas or of the show. If you've ever seen the show, the kind of the kind of premise of it is that it's the young sort of sidekicks of all the heroes, Batman, Superman, Aquaman, all those guys, and they have their sort of sidekicks, Robin, Aqualad, Kid Flash, and then you discover Superboy in the show as well. You've got an overarching storyline where the plot is there's a villain organization called the Light, and it is an amalgam sort of batch of villains. They've got people like Vandal Savage, Ra's al Ghul, Lex. It's kind of like all the sort of the main big hitters of each superhero's pantheon of Rogues Gallery. You've got a story where it's kind of what why they kind of called the Light is, and they're sort of hiding, and they're bringing it's sort of like you're getting pieces of the picture or pieces of the puzzle as you go through the show. Like there's a plot that they're trying to hatch, and the heroes are sort of piece by piece breaking it down and getting through. But the main blueprint I think you could use is the fact that you have a shadow group of the villains in the background that are sort of orchestrating the things that are happening. But it's portrayed that the Justice League and the other heroes and stuff are fighting smaller battles that are more meant to smokescreen the actual operations that are happening broader on with the bigger villains. So you have like Joker might be sent out to sort of cause chaos, and there's bigger plans behind the scenes of what's actually happening. I think because I think DC, one pitfall I don't think you want to fall into if you don't want to copy Marvel is having one overarching villain, kind of like Thanos was. I mean, you can do that with Darkseid, but I think if you go there straight away, that's another thing where you're kind of burning future storylines. You want to sort of keep it more focused on not the street level, but the earth level, kind of what's happening. And there is in the show they eventually link up with Darkseid, like he's kind of behind the Light and Vandal Savage anyway. But you have the luxury of not, kind of like we were saying before, burning villains. You don't have to kill the villain at the end, but they're only the stepping stone to what is happening next, kind of thing. And you could keep building from that. And there's just a lot of interesting aspects when you go into not just teaming off the villains with their own respective sort of heroes that they're fighting, but they mix and match a lot. So it is people that you're not always used to seeing fighting each other and interacting with each other, sort of having makes it a lot more of a different experience than a lot of the normal movies you might get, where it is a lot of the Batman versus Joker, Superman versus Lex repeated sort of thing. It does give you a little bit more opportunity to mix it up if you're starting off creating a world. And one of the provisos in this is, because this is a 10-year plan, so I wouldn't start the world from scratch. That's why the Young Justice, I think, is a good blueprint, because it does come into almost a fully built, fully fleshed out DC world. You could almost kind of think of it as a continuation of the old Justice League TV show, cartoon show. You've got basically, Dick Grayson is kind of stepping out of Batman's shadow a little bit. He's still Robin. He's not Nightwing yet. He's still Robin, but he's kind of becoming more and more independent as he goes on in his sort of crime fighting career. And that's why one of the things I said it, I briefly mentioned it in the last stream, but one of the movies I would start with if I was starting the DC universe again would be Nightwing. And one of the reasons is I don't want to get stuck into the trap of continually bringing in either a new Robin or a new sidekick for Batman in that sort of storyline, or falling into the trap of starting with everyone's a solo character and then everyone just becomes a sort of has a sidekick sort of thing. If you start that off already, you can branch them off because they've already had those adventures. You can split them up. You can have more backstory that you don't always need to explain, but you can cheat it a little bit. So you can just create whatever sort of conflict that happened before you want. So Batman could have had 100 fights with the Riddler. He could have only had like 3 encounters with the Riddler. It's kind of when you're not starting from scratch, I think you get a little bit more freedom to embellish what's gone before, and you're not stuck in one of the problems with like sort of what Batman Begins was sort of showing that Joker card at the end. Well, then you're stuck almost in a way of going to Joker for Dark Knight, and you can't take too much time between Batman Begins and the Dark Knight in universe, because what's the Joker been doing all that time? If he's kind of you've laid the groundwork for that character there. If you go too far forward, you're kind of just skipping off too much of what could have happened there. But if you start off with nothing, if you start off with, if you don't start off with nothing, and you have already I'd say a pre-organized world. You have plans, but you're not exactly locked into this happened kind of thing. You have a lot of leadway where you can go with stories. So you start with Nightwing, and you already have maybe a Tim Drake. You definitely have a Jason Todd already, and you have a Batgirl. Having the Bat family already, you can sort of rehab the Batman image a bit of what I think was wrong with it, like pushing the dark take on the character from movie to movie. If you have the Bat family, you already you take one of the like the sort of the biggest aspects of Batman, which is the Bat family, and it definitely softens him a bit. It gives him more of a, because people don't sort of think about this aspect of the character, but the character, the Batman's heart is one of his biggest sort of assets. The one of the things that the Batman animated series got right really well was the sort of the heart of the character, and I think having the Bat family in there helps show that more than if you're just constantly having Batman as a solo character. And having the Bat family there already, not all of them, maybe you could maybe just have Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon to start with, and then the start of that universe is sort of Tim Drake being established, and maybe Jason Todd either just ending or maybe coming back, and you're not stuck in that cycle of, okay, well, if I start Batman movies now, in 10 years if I've got one Robin, in 10 years I'm spending each Batman movie essentially just introducing another character. You've got stories that you could just go straight off the bat with. If you wanted to start with something like Court of Owls or like later storylines, or you could go back and even start with something like a Death in the Family or all sorts of things. But I think if you start too early, like another Superman origin story, another Batman origin story, you're just showing people what they've already seen multiple times before, and B, you're not really doing justice to the whole DC universe if you're kind of almost wanting to tell the same story over and over again. There's so many stories that don't necessarily need to take place in that first few years of their career. Other ones, like having Aqualad and Aquaman already established together, I think you've got a better character in the universe with like a king Aquaman, an older Aquaman, than you do a young Aquaman, and having Aqualad as that sort of younger aspect of the story. And it's kind of the same. I mean, Green Lantern, they don't really address that much in the show. And I think that's kind of good for this blueprint that I want to use, because Green Lanterns kind of should almost be kind of on Earth as almost like shift workers, in a way. They should be sort of constantly, patrolling the sectors, as they call it. And you've got a lot more stories for the Green Lanterns outside of Earth than you necessarily do in a combined DC kind of world. They are your sort of opportunity to get off world and explore different aspects of the DC universe and slowly bring in those either Apocalypse, New Genesis, War World, those sort of more out there aspects of the DC lore. But so yeah, we've got those ones, and who's the other big impact? Superboy. So in the show, Superboy is found in the first episode as a clone, as an experiment, locked away. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do and not just have the same old Superman and Lex stories. I don't want to spoil it too much if you haven't seen Young Justice, because I think especially the first 2 seasons, I think if you are a DC fan, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of them, because they aren't the usual stories you're used to seeing, just like sort of comic book readapted. They're kind of more original takes on the universe, and it's same creator that did the Disney Gargoyles, so it has a pretty good pedigree. But as I said, season 1 and 2 are far better than season 3 and 4. I'd even say season 3 is almost unwatchable, and season 4, from what I saw of it, is decent, but not on the level of season 1 and 2. But Superboy, he's very much kind of the wild card. You can use it as a way to tell a Superman and Lex story that isn't exactly it's not one that you see often, but it's a story where you don't have to make Superman the taking on Earth-ending threats all the time. You can almost spend a lot of the time as Clark Kent, because it is more of a a, a character relationship builder with Superboy and Superman than it is anything else through the show. And I mean, there's obviously you add in other aspects. You don't want to make it like a like a basically just like a buddy cop movie or something. Although there is an absolutely needed buddy cop movie that could be done in the DC universe with people like Red Arrow or Speedy and Nightwing, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name. He's a clone of Roy Harper, so he's Arsenal, and there was Guardian, and that's one of the standout episodes. If you ever see Young Justice, it's the Longbow Security Company, and that as a concept in a movie, a kind of like a buddy cop esque, sort of like a Lethal Weapon, would be pretty much hard to top for me. And especially the way they do it in the show, there's a lot of room to really build that into a movie and tie it into sort of other things that were happening in the overall aspect of it all. But so mainly I just want to, if it's going to be cohesive, I think starting everything from scratch in the DC universe is a tough task. Origin story after origin story with that many characters that sort of need to be introduced, without, and I mean, because none of my movies are leading to like a Justice League or anything. They're just connected, but they're not event movies. They're more just solo universe movies. There's a way to build that into something that's really really cool. Are you going off, Formo? Yeah, there's a blueprint in the Young Justice show that could be, I'd say, 10 years, and you'd have, I mean, if you gave me 10 years, $1 billion. So I'd give you, well, this would be less than 10 years, because you could get 10 movies for $1 billion, $100 million each for budget for each one. I think minimum of a DC universe being built, the minimum you'd get, like, for building a DC universe, because you're covering a lot of fans there, you're covering a lot of different areas of the DC universe. I think you'd be looking at something like $1 billion for each movie. So you're looking at about $10 billion for your next 10 movies from the DC universe, for pretty much no event, no big event movie. Like, you could almost go 15 movies without a sort of like a Civil War or an Infinity War or an Endgame sort of type movie. Like, you could do the smaller ones that keep building up to that, but for a long time you could get away with just doing smaller scale. Because I mean, $100 million budget still sounds like a lot, but I mean, that's $50 million less than pretty much any superhero movie that gets made today. And I still think you're coming out on top. You've got, I mean, it's not just looking at Young Justice either. I mean, it's looking at the characters that they use in those scenarios, in those settings and stories, and finding their stories in the comics, which ones, which origin story works, um, which adaptation works best to fit into what we need to do here, um, because that's kind of what the MCU did when they did it best. Like, they weren't just taking storylines and adapting them; they were taking the characters and the storyline and adapting them to what the MCU needed at the time, which I think worked for them. Because I'm not the hugest fan of straight up adapting the comic book into the movie. I think you can get into a lot of problems there, and especially like not just I mean, like we've seen in the animation side, they run into problems just to fill time, like the Killing Joke and those sort of things. Like, they add stuff that isn't there, and it is kind of just to pad time, and that's because they're adapting something that A, isn't meant for that medium, and B, isn't meant for that time frame. So you take what you need from the source material, but you have to adapt it, literally. Like, that's the word, adapting. You adapt it to something else, to the medium it's going to. Anyway, yeah. So pretty much, so the 10-year plan, I'd end it with there's a confrontation in Young Justice that kind of culminates what happens in part of the season, but it's a bit too. I think it'd be a bit too messy to translate completely onto the big screen. You'd have sort of like a more covert sort of confrontation, and then maybe the battle that happens. But I don't think you'd have every superhero fighting every villain. I think you'd have to manicure it down a bit, so it's you've got the main players confronting each other, but anything more than maybe like 5 to 6 fighting each other in a 5 to 6 versus another 5 to 6 fighting each other on screen in that sort of capacity. I think it just gets a little bit too like the end of Endgame, where it's a bit there is a bit too much happening, where a lot of that could have been simplified a lot more if you don't bring everyone back from like, you don't need everyone in Wakanda, you don't need every sorcerer, you don't need every I can't remember who else was there, every Asgardian that was left. You just need the main players fighting a group from the other side that's the main, because then it makes it raises the stakes more, because they're fighting you're fighting a bigger force, outnumbered, that sort of thing. It raises the tension of the movie if you've actually got if the heroes are outnumbered to a degree. But yeah, there is a confrontation, and it's part of a because I'm jumping forward a season till the second one. There is a subplot where there's one of the heroes is infiltrating the enemy ranks, and there is the reveal at the end where they're they reveal to the villain that I'm not here to do this, what you think I'm doing. I'm actually here to stop you and all that sort of stuff. And there is a definite scenario and setting there where that could be a very interesting end plot to a sort of a 3 or 4 running series of movies, where you're sort of getting through the plot of what the villains are actually up to. They're still sending proxy villains to fight, but the heroes are sort of onto that, and they're actually working the plan from the other side. I think it's just to me, it's a bit different than the sort of usual. Everything builds up to a giant galactic space battle, or something, like a war, something along those lines. But for the most part, I think that'd be pretty cool to see for a 10-year plan anyway. And it would be like it wouldn't be one of those movie universes like sort of like the MCU where that's the universe you keep going with for like another 10 years after that. Like it would be very much a this universe or this um slate of films has a starting point and an end point, and you sort of want to have some discipline to stick to that. You could use it as like an event at the end of the very thing to kind of do a flashpoint, and then it branches off into another 10 years where you're doing, all origin stories, and you're introducing characters that you may not have introduced onto the screen before. But I think for the most part, you kind of, I think if you have a start and an end point, I think you're going to have a better baseline of what you need to do to get to that end point. But I think I've been rambling long enough. I think it's time to leave you all. It's 1 a.m. here where I am. Thank you all for being here. I've had a few people in the chat. Thank you all for contributing. I know I've been rambling more than usual, but I mean, I think people think I'm a Marvel shill or a Marvel stan, but I have as much passion and interest in DC as I do Marvel. It's just that DC hasn't given me much to really praise them for in my view for about 20 years. Besides Batman Begins and a couple animated movies, I've been pretty disappointed with a lot of the showing. But anyway, next, I've borrowed the laptop. I'm hoping to stream a bit more now. My computer's not the best at the moment. Got some problems with the CPU, so I've got to get some either new thermal paste and a new bracket to hopefully try and set it back up on the motherboard, or I might have to buy a new one. But I think the CPU itself is okay. It's just the actual attachment to the motherboard. So I'll see how that goes. But yeah, hopefully I'm trying to get some new streams set up. I've got some one that I've had planned for ages, the Phantom and the Shadow double feature. I'm thinking I might actually just make it a individual one. So do the Phantom and then do a different one for the Shadow. But I'll see about that because I'm not. I don't know that much about the movies, like behind the scenes or the production or anything of those ones. The Phantom was partly made in Australia, up on the Gold Coast, kind of near where this retard lives. But there's just really not a lot of information I can find, like interesting sort of information, I think, about the production. Like there's a lot of usual stuff, but I mean, like, just sort of stuff that I find interesting, like why they chose to shoot part of it in Australia. Might have just been cost, I don't know. But the stuff like you usually find on Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff, it's just like I find a lot of that stuff interesting. But thanks for all being here. Hopefully I'll get some new streams coming out soon. Not too many more like these, I don't think, because I've said everything I really want to say about DC, and I said most of what I want to say about Marvel. I might do another Marvel one and kind of do more what I did at the end here and give what I would kind of do if I was in charge of moving the Marvel studios forward for like the next 10 years. But I want to just more get back to doing the individual movie ones, because I find it really fun to just pick one movie or a sort of a series of movies or something and go in depth on that. But I have plans to do some sort of compilation ones. Maybe I'll pick a director or pick a film franchise and not just get stuck to one movie, and get some people on so we can sort of just go back and forth about different ones. It will never be Die Hard 5. So on that note, see ya.